So our next presenter is Ariana Negreiro, and she's from Michigan State University as well. And her research topic that she's presenting on is the effect of low forage diet on the yields of milk and milk components and feed efficiency in mid-lactation dairy cows.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Borman. So I will be presenting today on the effects of a low forage diet on the yields of milk and milk components and feed efficiency of mid-lactation dairy cows. So a little bit of background information is that with changes in availability of high quality forages due to different cropping seasons or geographic location, especially in the Midwest over last year's cropping season, we saw a lot of changes in forage quality and forage amount that a lot of dairy farms are trying to manage around. So it's important to find alternative fiber sources. Dairy cows require sufficient NDF in their diet to maximize dry matter intake and rumen function and maintain that milk yield. So that was done by different studies. I reference here Oba and Allen. So that was also one of the main focuses with changing these forage sources or fiber sources with forage. We want to make sure that there's sufficient NDF in both diets. And studies observed variable responses in milk protein and fat yields with non-forage fiber supplementation, depending on sources of fat supplementation, protein supplementation, and starch. The objective of this study was to determine the effects of feeding a low forage diet with amino acid balancing and supplemental palmitic acid on digestibility and the yields of milk and milk components. Our hypothesis was that a low forage diet containing similar starch, NDF, and crude protein levels to a typical Midwestern diet, which was our control, supplemented with palmitic acid and amino acid balancing, will maintain or surpass the yield of milk and milk components when compared to a high forage diet. Just briefly, materials and methods, we had 32 multiparous Holstein cows that were mid-lactation and were medium to high producing cows with a 51 kilogram milk average. There's 2 treatments to control, which was a typical Midwestern diet and a low forage diet. It's a crossover design with 2 periods. And again, that palmitic acid enriched fatty acid supplement and the amino acid balancing was added to the low forage diet. This is just to point out that the high forage diet had around 27 pounds of forage, while the low forage diet had around 15 pounds of forage. So a drastic difference in forage between these 2 diets. And here's just a visual that you can see the low forage diet on the left and the high forage diet on the right. They do differ a little bit visually and with texture, but we want to make sure I have enough long particles and support that NDF and that rumen fill as well with these 2 diets. So breaking out a little bit more, diets were balanced for NDF, starch, and crude protein. And then fat, methionine, and lysine were increased in the low forage diet. RDP was decreased in the low forage diet while RUP increased. And now for the results, I just wanted to go over some of the main production results that we have. And we can see here with the normal forage diet in blue and the low forage diet in green. And in kilograms per day here, we're reporting dry matter intake, milk, and energy corrected milk. And there's a significant lower dry matter intake for the low forage diet versus normal forage diet here. So you can see that the dry matter intake for the low forage diet was 28 kilograms per day, while the normal was 34. There wasn't a significant difference in milk, and we did see an increase in energy corrected milk with this low forage diet. This is broken down by looking at the kilograms of fat, protein, and lactose produced. You can see here in the low forage diet, there wasn't a significant difference. There was a significant difference in fat yield and protein yield, and no significance with the lactose. And overall, looking at the lower dry matter intake with the higher production of fat and protein, you can see that the feed efficiency for the normal forage diet was 1.42, while the low forage diet, it was 1.78. So we had a much higher feed efficiency, energy corrected milk over dry matter intake for these low forage diets. So our results indicate that cows fed a low forage diet supplemented with amino acid and fatty acids produced more fat and protein with a lower dry matter intake, and that the low forage diet did not impact milk yield, body weight, or body weight change. It did increase body condition score slightly, which I didn't show in these results just for the truncation of time. So I would just like to acknowledge different sponsors for this trial, Dr. Locke and the lab group, the MSC Dairy Farm staff, and other people that assisted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at my email address.
Thank you, Ariana. We do have a question on the chat that came through, so we'll ask that, and then we do have some time, so I might ask a follow-up as well. So there's a question about did you measure the particle size distribution of the Penn State particle separator between the two diets?
Yes, so when we first started out feeding both diets, I went for the first week and used a Penn State shaker box and measured the different particle lengths. And there was a slight difference, but nothing that was statistically different between the two diets. So we went, and I also looked for sorting and seeing if there was a difference in sorting between the two diets, and we didn't observe any of that either. Nothing that was any kind of statistical difference visually or, numerically. There was a slight difference, but nothing that would have been significant.
Thank you. And then I'm sure you get this question a lot, but from experience feeding cows low forage diets, it usually doesn't decrease dry matter intake. So any thoughts on why in this study it's decreasing dry matter intake with less forage in the diet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, that's one of the first questions that comes up, and it's very valid. We have a few different thoughts on this. One of them is to note that I haven't been able to finish with the digestibility data for this trial either. So really, hopefully that digestibility data will help us answer that question further. But right now, at least we can hypothesize that with palmitic acid supplementation and other studies, we've seen that that has increased NDF digestibility in the rumen. So we're wondering if that palmitic acid supplementation that we had in this trial helped with overall digestibility and that NDF digestibility, allowing them to digest their food better, and then they don't need to eat as much.
And then we do have another question that came in. Does palmitic acid suppress the production of insulin and cause an increase in production?
So that's a good question as well. I don't have that data back for this specific trial, so I can't answer. We did take blood samples, and we are planning on sending them out and looking at insulin levels. As of right now, there is a little bit of different, I know that there's different research out there looking at insulin responses, and we've observed a few different things with palmitic acid in our lab, and I think it depends on production level of the cows. So off the top of my head, I don't know for this group and how it would pertain to this study.